today's topics, right, I will talk about personal finance. Specifically, I will talk about the debt, for example, like credit card debt. So the reason why I talk about this topic, right, is that I saw this news article. So this is the headlines. Singaporeans fall further into credit card debt as rollover balances hit record high. So I'll take a few sentences from this news and just talk about it in more details. The MS noted that credit card rollover balance, the amount not paid by the due date, hit a record high of 7.9 billion in the third quarter of 2024. Then total credit card billings are also up, increasing 1.3% from the second quarter of 2024 to 24 billions in the third quarters. So these are big numbers, because I'm thinking, let's say if we talk about US market, right, their credit card debt, their total debt is all very big number because their population is a lot larger, right? But for Singapore, the population size isn't that big, but still we have 7.5 billions rollover balances. That means these are the amount that people haven't cleared by the due date. And this is considered almost going to the bad debt situations. Then if we don't count that, right, we count the total credit card, right, which let's say, for example, I also swipe my credit card. It's not like every time I swipe straight away, I pay, right? So those debt will add up to this 24 billion. Still a very sizable amount. So I'm just thinking that if you take all this number divided by the number of populations, it is not small. Later we'll look into the numbers in more details. A Credit Bureau Singapore report offered further insights into the behavior of different age groups. It shows that consumer in the 45 to 49 age group had the largest amount of unsecured credit card debt in the third quarter of 2024. This cohort had average outstanding balance, the amount owed but not paid, of $6,670, almost $7,000 per person. So I think it's quite significant because to me, let's say if you have some credit card debt, you are not able to clear in certain month, right? And then you just clear up in the next 1 month or so once you take care of the liquidity and stuff, right? Then I think still okay. We're still talking about like small amount, right? A few $100s shouldn't be that big. Now we are talking about average of 6,670, and this is just average, right? I'm sure that within this cohort there are people who owe credit card debt of, let's say, 20,000, 50,000, even 100,000. So definitely is something that's quite concerning, especially for those who are affected. People aged 40 to 45 had average outstanding balances of 6,542, while those from 50 to 54 owe $6,304 on average. Okay, I would say this is the shocking or not shocking part, because I think we all know that credit card debt, let's say if you don't clear it by the due date, right, the interest rate is very, very high. But I always thought that this number is, let's call it like 20+%. But I don't know it is as high as 27.8% for both DBS and UOB. And I mean, as stated here, interest compound on a daily basis if you pay only the minimum amount due each month, meaning interest is charged daily on the outstanding amount. So 28% of interest charges. So remember, let's say there's a due date, right? Don't think that it's fine to, just wait a couple of days after the due date, because for every day, right, they will actually charge a very, very high interest in the magnitude of about close to 28%. I think that's very crazy, right? Because if you think about like talking about interest rate, right, if we put our money in banks or we put our money in treasury bill, we are earning, let's call it like 3%, around 3%, right? Either close to 3% or something slightly more, okay? Or let's say if you invest in some bond funds which exposed to corporate bonds, you might get something higher. Let's call it like, let's say 3.5%. Those are the interest rate that we earn, right? But when the banks, they give you credit card and you just happily swipe, and then provided that, let's say if you miss the due date, right, then they start charging like 28%. It is good money making machines for the banks, not for the borrowers. So 28% is really, really crazy. Whoever pay a credit card interest of this kind of magnitude, let's say if you pay on just even $5,000 or $10,000, not even talking about, let's say, 100,000, right? It's still quite a sizable interest payment that you're going to pay. And if you don't pay, then it will keep on compound. So that's the things to pay attention to. So I think rule number one on personal finance, I think it is like, although all this credit card is really convenient, but you have to remember, don't ever let it roll over to past the due date. So you have to clear it before the due date. So that's like the number one reminder that every one of us have to do. The interest charges are 3% higher if you do not even pay the minimum amount. So DBS and UOB levy 30.8% per annum and OCBC 30.78%. The banks also impose late charges of $100 if the minimum amount is not paid. So you see, again, if you do not even pay the minimum amount due, right? Then they charge you like extra. Okay, so from bank perspective, I think maybe you can say that it makes sense for them to charge this kind of percentage because not every dollars that they lend out using credit card, right, they are able to get the money back. Because some borrowers really, they borrow all this money, then they just fail to pay and then they go bankrupt, right? If the consumer or the borrower go bankrupt, I think banks won't be able to collect the debt. So they need to charge more for those who are able to pay, for those who are not bankrupt, so that it is able to cover those borrowers that go bankrupt, right? This is why all these charges is very high. But that's from bank perspective, right? Our concern is mainly from our individual perspective, is that you just need to make sure that you pay all these interest, right? Because the moment you, let's say I know those who borrow credit card, it's not like just one credit card, right? Sometimes people have like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 credit cards, and then they borrow different accounts. Sometimes you just like not looking at certain account, then you just miss the payments, right? And once you miss the payments, it compound at close to 31%. Just within short period of time, you can see that your debt really go up to the moon. Eventually, you still need to pay back, right? I mean, the alternative is that you go bankrupt. Do you want to subject to that? This is like a very big trap for the borrowers who are not disciplined. So I would say that this one need to pay attention. Don't let your credit card balances roll over. So make sure that you pay before the due date. Okay, I think this one is more details, talking about the numbers that I shared earlier. It's in the same news, right? So you look at the total card billings, 24 billions. This has increased quite significantly from COVID crisis. So I think it's getting a lot more concerning. But not right now, in terms of whether they are able to pay back, in terms of the delinquency, I think it's still okay. Meaning that although people are racking up all these credit card bills, right? But in terms of the employment rate, everything still looks healthy as of now. So I think from bank perspective, they're fine. Not a big systemic issues here. For the rollover balance, I think right now is close to 8 billions. I think if you divide by GDP, stuff like that, I don't think this one in aggregate is like such a big concern for the overall market. But I think the concerning part is not the systemic part, but on the subset of the borrowers, right? Meaning that I think most people use credit card. I also use credit card for the convenience. But out of, let's say, 10 people, I don't know, maybe like 1 or 2 people who are really not disciplined in managing their personal finance. They have keep on racking up bills and then not able to pay, and then past due date, and then they are paying 30%. I'm not sure whether this group of borrowers, are they really go into the statement and go and calculate the interest rate. If you really know that the interest rate that you are paying is like 30%, right? That is the number one priority to clear up those debt, right? So I think this is something that makes sense to do, but I don't think everyone will do that, because for this subset of people, they might not be as disciplined to keep track of their finances, right? So I would say New Year, if you know that you have some credit card bill that you haven't settled, right, I will encourage you to go after all these statements, make sure that you clear all this credit card debt. This should be the step number one before we talk about all things about, like, let's say, asset allocations, talk about investment, talk about which stocks to buy, those kind of things. You need to sort out your personal finance first before you go into other areas. This one is the number one priority. If not, right, when you invest in stock market, let's call it like you get like 20+% from S&P 500. But if you have certain amount in credit card bill that you have to pay 30%, right, then actually it's better off to take your money, just pay off this credit card bill and save that 30% interest, right? So that's the right things to do. And then if we talk about cohorts, you can see that let's say between 35 to 50, average, let's say between $5,000 to $7,000. But I think average is not the right metrics to look at, because I'm thinking that, let's say, out of this subset, right, there's always people who, rack up a large credit card bill, and those are the ones that suffer. Make sure that you are not one of those people. If you are very disciplined, you are someone who is really take good care of your personal finance, right, all these consumer balances of unsecured credit card, right, it should be close to zero. At least that's what I'm doing. Okay, then just want to take a step back and just talk about debt in general, right? I would say that debt, there are good debt and there are bad debt, because there are all sorts of different debt, right? I look at my personal balance sheet, I think the largest debt is actually the mortgage. So no choice. I buy a unit, even I bought this HDB at close to 400,000. It's still a sizable amount. I have no choice. I have to take bank loan, take the mortgage, and I will take the time to pay off this debt, right? This one, I think most people don't have a choice, okay? But aside from mortgage, right, the other types of debt, I would say that you need to be careful already. Because say, for example, let's say, does it make sense to borrow a margin loan from brokerage account to invest in stock market? Say, for example, let's say some people will argue that, because you are doing it for investment, so it is a good debt. So I disagree with that. The reason is because if you borrow from brokerage account, the interest rate is also quite high, especially let's say if you borrow in USD currency, right? I think it's 5, maybe now since the Fed cut is already slightly lower, but I'll assume it is close to 5%, right? So still a very high interest rate. So I think that one you should avoid. Using debt to buy car, this one I would say that my first reaction is that no, let's say if you are buying car, because to me car, for most people, right, it is something that's good to have. It is not something that's necessary. Something that is good to have, right, it is a luxury, right? If you want to buy that, make sure that you have enough cash to pay off and not taking up debt. Because if you are taking up debt, on one hand you are paying interest to the bank, on the other hand your car is depreciating every year. So it is very bad purchase decisions. Maybe there are some exceptions. For example, let's say if you work as agent, you need to travel, you really need the car. That one is exception. But for most people, let's say if you are similar situations like me, right? I go to office just one trip to office and then one trip back from the office, right? I don't need to travel to multiple places every day, right? So if you are having that kind of situation, I would say that just avoid having car unless you are able to, clear at one go. So avoid taking up auto loan just for like purchasing this kind of luxury items. Then I think there are a whole list of bad debt, but the worst one I think is credit card. Because credit card, people are taking credit card debt, I think it's because it is very convenient. They will argue that, oh, if you use credit card, you can collect miles, get cashback, those kind of things. Yes, I do agree with that, but you just need to be very disciplined at managing your debt. Don't let that, let's say like the 4 or 5 credit cards and you just pay 1 or 2 and then the other 3 you forgot about it. Don't end up with this kind of situations because the interest rate is really, really crazy high. Personally, how I use my credit card, right? So this one, I won't say that my way of using credit card is the right way to use it, but at least that's how I use it. So I just share a bit more about my approach. Okay, right now I only have 2 credit cards. I always only use one card. The other one, you can call it, that's like like backup. Sometimes you know what, one credit card down, I still have the other one, right? So only 2. So very easy to manage, right? So I don't have 4, 5, 6 cards that I need to pay attention to. And then second point is that I do not optimize credit card miles and cashback, those kind of things. I am really, really bad. At one point, I tried to do that. I actually want to like learn how to play all this game, miles or cashback or whatever. But really, I try it and then I just give up halfway because I really, it's very, very bad at, diligently keeping track of all these miles and cashback stuff. So I just choose one and I don't want to share which credit card that I'm using. I think that's not important. There are other YouTubers out there that share about all these tricks, how to maximize your credit card and stuff. I think if you want to play that, feel free to do so. But my way is that I really don't optimize that. I would just, happily give up all these things, knowing that I'm not optimizing and all these games. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. And then every 2 weeks, this one is not like fixed 2 weeks. It's more or less like sometimes it's about 1 week plus, sometimes it's about 2 to 3 weeks. But for sure is that at least like twice a month, right, I will clear my credit card debt, clear everything. And by everything, right, is including those transactions that haven't even show up on my bills. Like let's say if you log on to the online banking, right, you can actually check your credit card statements, right? Let's say if you swipe something 2 days ago, it already show up. But let's say if you just swipe it like few hours ago, right, it won't show up, right? Okay, so even those, right, I will clear. And how I know that amount is I know how much is my credit card limit. Let's say my credit card limit is 20,000, and then I log in, I saw that it is 19,500. So I know that I have swiped that 500, although not all transactions has shown up, right? Then I would just take the 20,000 limit minus the 19,500, and then I know it's 500, right? Then I would just transfer my money from my bank account, that $500 to the credit card, and just settle it. So I do that every, let's say 1 to 2 weeks. So the reason is that sometimes if I'm busy with work, sometimes I tend to like forget about all this online banking and stuff, right? So let's say if I just late payment and then need to pay those kind of like 20+% interest, I just want to avoid that as much as possible. And sometimes like transactions, right, they are, let's say, fraud and stuff. It shows as transactions, right? So every 2 weeks I will just look at those amount and make sure that browse through the transaction, make sure that those are the items that I transacted, not some fraud, right? So I look at all those, everything looks good, clear it out and just pay at one go. I don't want to wait it until like every month, because once it's like after 30 days, right, I tend not to be able to remember what are those transactions. And sometimes the descriptions, right, the statements, right, is not that very clear to know that, okay, this is for what transactions, right? Because let's say when we go for dining, shopping, we forget what's the name of the shops, for example, right? Or names of the restaurant. So I think, let's say if we keep it like within like 2 weeks, right, I still able to remember those transactions and I can like in one glance know what are those and just clear it in one go. So that's my approach. I think it served me well. So far, I haven't really like missed all this credit card payment, and I'm really, really not willing to pay that 20 to close to 30% interest rate. So that's my strategy. So my strategy is that forget about all these miles and cashback. I can afford to, missing all this, but I cannot afford to pay interest lah. So at least that's my thought process. Okay, that's all about the personal finance topic. So I think when I share about credit card stuff, right, and then Maximus just say that, okay, what's the investment strategy for 2025? So I'll take this opportunity to share a bit more here on my investment strategy, and then let's say if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Okay, so I'll just say take a step back, right? I think last video I talked about asset allocations, I talked about CPF. If we take a step back and just look at each of these asset class, right, these are the main one on the screen here. So we have cash, we have equities, we have fixed income, and then we have alternative investments, which include, for example, like real estate, gold, silver, cryptocurrency, and so on, right? So these are the main asset class, and my plan here is to share which asset class that I will focus more on for 2025. If I'm to summarize in one sentence, right, it is to have a balanced exposure to each one of these. Okay, so I will go into more details here. So the first one, right, for cash, I will group all these cash equivalents, money market funds, treasury bill, all this to be, one category. This is really like the cash liquid category. So this one, I put an arrow up there to show that I will probably solely increase my exposure to cash. Okay, so the reason is very simple. I think I shared many times in the past. The market looks overvalued now, and I think it's good to keep some cash so that, let's say, if there's any downturn in the market, right, so I can deploy all this cash. So that's number one. Second one is equities. Here, there are two things that's mentioned: stocks and dividend payments. I will group these two together. To me, I care more about the total return instead of like just dividends here, right? At least for the equities portfolio, because if I look at my portfolio, yes, there are some holdings, for example, like TSMC, right, they are paying dividends, which I'm happy to receive that. I'm not saying that, oh, just because it's pay dividends, then it is not a growth stocks, then I avoid that. Not the case. Sometimes dividends make sense, and sometimes it's just because the company has been paying dividends, they just continue to pay. So I just continue to receive that. It doesn't affect my investment decisions whether a company pay dividend or not. So these stocks and dividend payments, I'll group it together. Slowly, I will increase it. How much I deploy into stocks, it depends on the market environment. Because right now, let's say the market continue to rallying up, right? Sometimes it is, especially when we are talking about US market, is really quite overvalued. So I will take it slow. Let's say if there's opportunity, I will deploy more into stock market. But generally, the direction is up. It's unlikely to come down, right? Because come down means I need to sell, right? So I don't have any plan to sell my equities holding. That's equities. Then the third one, fixed income. I struck up the bonds because I don't really have bond allocations. Okay, even let's say the bond funds that I have, right, is those very short one. I actually consider that together with the cash equivalent. So let's say if you buy a bond funds, but it is like less than 1 to 3 years duration, right, it is cash equivalent to me. So that one is not in. The one that I put under the fixed income category is actually the CPF, because CPF pay 4% interest on the SA. So I talked about CPF and I also shared about my CPF balance in the previous video, right? I already did my top up to the MediSave account. So CPF definitely will build up this year, and together with interest rate, again, it will build up over time. So that's CPF. And then the last one, right, will be the alternative investment for real estate. This one, real estate, I would say it consists of mainly two, right? One is the unit that I'm staying. You can include that in your net worth or not. I think it's up to you. But for me, it's really for utility purpose. I have to stay somewhere, right? So that's real estate. The other one that I will put under the real estate category is actually REITs. So REITs, right, it is the investment real estate, right? So if you buy REITs, you collect dividends over time. So that's something that I plan to allocate more into REITs for in the upcoming years. So that's under the real estate. For gold and silver, this one to me, I have very tiny exposure, similar to my cryptocurrency. I have tiny exposure there. These are really like I don't plan to do anything on those lah. But for cryptocurrency, right, just words here. Although I did share that my cryptocurrency, these are some, stuff that I bought in the past is stored in the cold wallet, right? I didn't touch that for quite some time already. But if you ask me for my outlook for 2025, right, with respect to cryptocurrency, right, I'm actually getting a lot more bearish. The reason is because I saw that, first thing is that there's already a run up, okay? So that's, if let's say you want to cash out, let's say 1 year ago you plan to cash out, right? I would say that now probably it's a good time to cash out already because the price already ran up. At least you can assure yourself that you are not, like paper hand during the winter period, right? So now it's considered, I would say, good time, okay? If you already plan to sell. But why I'm getting bearish is because I saw that players like MicroStrategy, the game that playing. So basically, they are trying to issue equity, issue convertible bonds, and buy. So a lot of all these buyings is through this kind of channels, and there are a lot of hopes saying that US government will build what strategic reserve for cryptocurrency. So a lot of all this narrative that's playing, like as if everyone agree that cryptocurrency can only go up, right? And you look at the meme coins, right? Those fat coins, PP coins, this kind of like meme coins also can go up so much. So usually it signals to me like the current environments looks closer to 2021 environment than those during winter environment. So let's say if you really want to have some exposure to cryptocurrency, I would say that at least you have to do some market timing here. Buy it during the winter period where there's nobody talk about crypto. But right now, I think as of like currently 2025, right, early 2025, I sense that there are too much talk about cryptocurrency. And I started to have some text messages from friends that never touched crypto, right? And asking me like, oh, do you know about cryptocurrency? My immediate response is that don't touch. If you haven't touched cryptocurrency up until now, right, you shouldn't touch it now, because if you enter now, it's likely that you will end up back holdings later. That's the market timing part, is that there's too much bullishness in this field. That's why I would say that out of all these different asset category, right, I'm still bullish on stocks. The problem is that the market looks overvalued, but still all these companies, they are producing cash flow, right? So I'm happy to hold on to it. But for cryptocurrency, most of them are not paying dividends, but they are paying, let's say they're giving staking rewards, those kind of things. I think that's, topic for another day, but I don't think they are, cash flow generating machines. If you play with cryptocurrency, it is like a lot more similar to commodities than cash flow income generating companies. So I'll put that in same category as commodity. And given the kind of environment that we are in, right, I'm a lot more bearish as compared to previous years lah. So I plan to reduce my exposure in cryptocurrency. So that's my 2025 investment strategy. That's all about the sharing. So let's say if you want to support my channel, remember to click like and subscribe and leave your comment down at the comment sections so that my video get pushed to more people. Thank you for your support.